All right, three, two, one. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On tonight's show, I have a very special guest. His name is Johnny Cirucci. I interviewed him back in 2016 for the Ed Opperman report. He was the second hour after I interviewed Juanita Broderick prior to anything that happened during the 2016 presidential candidate or presidential election. So Johnny was kind enough to kind of step in after I had a abrupt or pretty short abbreviated, what I would call an abbreviated interview. But Johnny is an accomplished author. He's written 3 books. I have copies of 2 of those books. The first one that he published is Illuminati Unmasked, Everything You Need to Know About the New World Order and How We Will Beat It, published 2015. Secret History, The Erased Clues That Prove Who Rules the World from Behind the Curtain, that was published November 24th, 2016. I have not read that book. But we talked about The Eaters of Children. I think it was maybe an earlier publication, but again, that title is Eaters of Children, The Pedocracy Exposed, How Access to Power is Granted Through the Rape, Torture, and Ritualistic Slaughter of the Children, I think is the rest of the title. It's kind of the Innocent, sorry. So anyway, those books are all available on Amazon for sure, but it kind of, after this whole Epstein affair and what's going on and it's still unraveling, I was in contact with Johnny and asked him to provide some insights. So we're going to talk about that. We know of some of the information, but anyway, Johnny has some information to share. Johnny, are you there?
I am, William. It's such a pleasure to be on with you again.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk about this important subject. For people who don't know your name, can you talk a little bit about your background and how you became interested
Sure.
in these dark subjects? And then just kind of maybe we can talk a little bit about Epstein and what your thoughts are.
You bet. Real quick. Fourth generation Italian and born and raised Roman Catholic and 20-year military guy, Marine Corps, Army, National Guard, time in Iraq. And born and raised to be a passionate, patriotic American, and that was part of my military service, one of the reasons why I got into the military, and very frustrated as a patriotic American, very frustrated with policies, government policies that affected me as a Marine, as a soldier, and also policies in general. Really heavy into so-called conservative media when I was younger, and just got frustrated with how at the advent of the Obama administration, it seemed like conservative media was pulling their punches. There was obviously a lot of things in Barack Obama's background that they were not covering. And it was the supposed death of Osama bin Laden in 2011, roughly about the same time that they were disclosing Barack Obama's birth certificate, that I was done with the conservative media and really mainstream media altogether, because I had both open source and inside source information that the bin Laden raid was not what we were told. And from a media standpoint alone, it was absolutely ludicrous. I mean, here they had supposedly waterboarded Khalid Sheikh Mohammed some 80 times to get every scrap of information out of him. And yet the whole reason for the so-called global war on terror, Osama bin Laden, and Navy Team SEAL 6's orders were to shoot him on sight and dump him in the ocean. How stupid are we? How stupid are we? So from there, I started to dig. And with the, like I said, that in my own personal experience of almost when, by the time I was involved in the Iraq War, the things like rules of engagement were getting really to the point of Vietnam treason, where just policies made absolutely no sense. The only way the policies made sense is if my own chain of command were trying to make the global war on terror worse, which is exactly what happened. So, and I could go off on a tangent onto who is in the CIA and how bad the CIA, for instance. So, as I was digging in, I'm finding, to my shock and to my surprise, that there are a lot of connections to the Vatican and the Catholic Church. And as a quick aside on this, at the time, the director of the Central Intelligence Agency was John Brennan, who was trained by the Jesuits at Fordham, the same school that Donald Trump spent 2 years at. And Donald Brennan is basically, John Brennan is basically a war criminal. Just sending drone strikes at any group of gathered innocent Middle Easterners at a wedding party. I mean, he's called the drone executioner. It became very clear to me that they were taking a fabricated war and doing everything they could to make it worse, not better. It had nothing to do. When I left, I came back, and the security measures were far worse than when I left. The sacrifices that I made, sacrifices that my brothers and sisters made, had nothing of an effect on the lives of Andrew. When I came back, good American citizens were walking through the airport, holding their arms up like prisoners of war, going through naked body scanners with their whole families. And meanwhile, there were people in the government who were actually making money off the naked body scanners that were being sold to the government.
Right.
Chertoff is one of them. Chertoff's wife teaches at Georgetown. This goes on and on. So anyway, this is the stuff that made me. I had a background in journalism. I wrote for my university newspaper, and was always blogging on my own in between then and now. And roughly at about 2015, I started to get real serious about this stuff as I was transitioning out of the military, and that's when I hit this turning point on the word. Back in 2015 and earlier, and 4 years earlier than that, Illuminati was a big word. Illuminati was a buzzword. Still is now, but not nearly as much. But when I found out the truth behind the so-called Illuminati, when I did my own honest research, and that no one was talking about this, I knew I had to go out on my own and do an expose. And that is that the so-called Illuminati, there's a couple of different ways to explain this. There's the general idea of the illumined ones, which are Gnostics, people that believe that they have secret knowledge, and by that secret knowledge they are empowered. That's just a general category.
Right.
Then there is a secret society founded by someone in 1776 on May 1st, very important date. Now this individual, Johann Adam Weishaupt, out of Bavaria, very interesting individual. His family was Jewish, but they were converted. They converted to Roman Catholicism. And Johann Adam Weishaupt was trained by the Jesuits for his entire life, starting at 7 years old. He stayed surrounded by Jesuits into his adulthood and eventually began to teach not just any topic, but canon law at Jesuit Ingolstadt University in Bavaria. That's not any old subject. So many people believe, and I'm one of them, that Weishaupt was actually an ordained Jesuit priest. And today we have a lot of misinformation and disinformation on how he broke with the Jesuits, he left the Jesuits, disenfranchised with the Jesuits. They say the same thing about Voltaire. Voltaire spent his entire life immersed in Jesuit schooling and supposedly broke with the Jesuits, and yet everything that Voltaire did as a so-called atheist, taking the crimes of the Catholic Church and blaming all of Christendom for them, is right in line with Jesuit doctrine. So I don't believe that Weishaupt broke with the Jesuits. I think that he was an ordained Jesuit with them all the entire time. And so it was like a lightning bolt hitting me, William, that Johann Adam Weishaupt was so intimately involved with the Jesuits, and yet everyone that talked about the so-called Illuminati, no one mentioned that. No, they never said the word Jesuit.
Right.
And so I knew I had to strike out on my own. Also, here's a very important thing that I uncovered, which is that, okay, so who are the Jesuits? The Jesuits are a fanatical order of priests that were birthed after Martin Luther broke from the Catholic Church, roughly 1534. Ignatius de Loyola, actually it's Ignacio Lopez was his birth name, a Spanish Basque noble who was wounded at the Battle of Pamplona and forced to leave the military and his dreams of grandeur, and dedicated himself to the Virgin Mary, and gathered around him like souls, Catholic knights, as it were, steeped in that same Gnostic Templar learning. And eventually he made his way to Paris, where he and Peter Faber and Francis Xavier started this organization. And they vowed their lives to the papacy. And within, 6 years, 1540, they were born. They went and they went before Pope Paul III, Alessandro Farnese. Farnese is one of the many names that should be popping up on Google when you ask Google who is in secret control of the world from behind the scenes. You get Rothschild and Rockefeller. Meanwhile, you should be getting Farnese, Orsini, Colonna, Aldobrandini, Medici, Borgia. These are the names that should be coming, so-called black nobility. That's popping right up, but they've been erased. Maybe one of the reasons they've been erased, William, is that Google was born on the same day of the Jesuits, September 27th.
Interesting.
So I'm finding out all this stuff, and I knew I needed to finally buckle. I've always, in the back of my mind, you need to write a book, and I hated it. I hated it because it just takes so much out of you. It requires discipline. It requires a lot of discipline. But it was these things that no one else was talking about that forced me to step up. So basically, I was an independent journalist with some modest experience in college and a lifetime military guy disgusted with his own government. And that's what started me down this path.
Yeah, and it's a credit to you on writing these books, too, because you have the same high standards, very well annotated, footnoted, very densely researched. So I appreciate you taking the time to make those books, too, because they're excellent reference points to use for any future studies as well. But when you look, using your background with all of this accumulated knowledge on secret societies and eaters of children, what are your thoughts about this unraveling? For me, it's still unraveling Epstein scandal.
Yeah, I think this was all carefully planned. All carefully planned. There's nothing that can be kept a secret forever and ever. And basically, as the title of Eaters of Children implies, there is a system that maintains loyalty unto death of the puppets in power, and that is abuse of the innocent. I'm very careful to say abuse of the innocent, not just children, anything or anyone innocent. That includes handicapped adults, animals, children, anything that is innocent. These people, and forgive my Christian background, I call them true Luciferians, dedicated to Lucifer, dedicated to Satan, in that anything that is innocent, vulnerable, defenseless, they take joy in causing pain and harm and violating. And when you have someone willing to do this, what are you willing to prostitute yourself for? What are you willing to do to aggrandize yourself, to get in power? And it's varying different levels. And the ones at the very top are willing to do the worst harm. So for people in the audience who have believed in a particular politician or anybody from an actor, actress, even sports figures across the board, military, judges, police, the higher you go in this rotten system, I want you to be assured, the more corrupt these people are, the more willing to do evil, heinous things these people are. And I'll give an example real quick. Donald Trump, immersed in Catholicism growing up, and nobody knows this, and trained by the Jesuits, and he transferred away from Fordham to the so-called private University of Pennsylvania. And I've got sources on this that say the University of Pennsylvania is secretly controlled by the Jesuits, and this enabled him to get a non-Catholic sheepskin, as it were. And his daughter Ivanka did the same thing. Spent 2 years with the Jesuits at Georgetown, and then also transferred to the University of Pennsylvania. However, his son Eric, and let me see, oh my goodness, Tiffany, from another marriage, all Jesuit, full Jesuit training. In fact, Eric, I believe it's Eric that's on the Georgetown School of Business Board of Directors. And he's really immersed in Jesuit schools. And so Trump, if you look up, it's very open for people to find, and it's tough to mention this stuff, but if you look up Donald Trump, Ivanka Trump, inappropriate, you're going to come up with some really disturbing things that lead you to wonder if Donald has had an incestuous relationship with Ivanka, who's with him in government everywhere he goes. And so this is the level of corruption. So people believe that Donald Trump is some kind of white knight outsider. Are you kidding me? Have you seen the video where he goes to WWE, like, what is it, SmackDown
Right.
number 27, and shaves Roman Catholic Vince McMahon's head, something like that. And meanwhile, Vince McMahon's wife is now one of his I think Secretary of Education, something. How is this possible?
Right. Yeah.
How is this possible? Have you seen the video of him and his lawyer cross-dressing Roman Catholic Rudy Giuliani, who was the gatekeeping mayor of New York City during 9/11, cross-dressing in public and shoving his face in Rudy Giuliani's fake breasts? That's a great video to watch. It tells you everything you need to know about who's in charge and how deviant they are.
Yes. No, it's really true. I mean, I think that this notion of him as this outsider who is taking on the system is promoted by his people, right? So that's kind of the way he is.
Completely contrived.
Yeah.
I'm shocked that they have such arrogant control that they utilized so-called Pizzagate to get him a leg up on Hillary Clinton when they're both as deeply immersed in sexual deviancy and violation of children. Equally so. I have no idea how it worked in that the Hillary supporters were, I guess, inept, or they were just part of a very big scripted play where you've got people like John Podesta, who was involved with all of this and leaked to be a pedophile himself. I've got a source on Podesta that he was a Jesuit seminarian.
Well, he went to Georgetown Law, right? So there
Absolutely.
You go. Right there, right
Absolutely.
near downtown.
And his brother Tony has a very powerful, wealthy political lobbyist group, the two of them together. And they were implicated in the Mattie McCann scandal, right? Was that McCann?
No, McCann. Supposedly, the APB or All Points Bulletin sketches looked like the two brothers, but Clement Freud, who is another pedophile, was involved in the McCann scandal. Who was from the UK? A lot of people don't know that guy, but he got exposed as a pedophile. And in the leaked emails, the Podesta brothers were in contact with the former Speaker of the House after he got out of jail for molesting boys. What was his name? It was
not Hastert.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were in contact and friends with Hastert, right?
No surprise.
No surprise. Across party lines, Democrat and Republican, and that you can look that up and find that. And then you have them associated with the witch Abramovich and the spirit cooking, who's also friends with Yao of God, who is also close to Oprah, right? So you can draw these direct correlations between people in power and just total depravity.
Yeah, and here's the thing for me, and I want to make this clear for your defense, is that what I have found is that all roads lead to Rome. And so obviously I was born and raised Roman Catholic. I'm no longer Roman Catholic. I'm a born-again Christian. That's my bias, so I apologize if it comes out. It will come out often. I don't mean to offend rank-and-file Catholics. And another big group that plays an important role, of course, Jeffrey Epstein was, maybe still is, there's a question as to whether or not he's still alive, Jewish. And what I've found is that all roads lead to Rome, and the Vatican is in just as much control and has just as much power as in the Middle Ages. And so this is what I've found, and when I mention these things, it's not my intent. It's just my intent to be truthful. It's not my intent to offend anybody. But I have found that really I say this often, really with the suppression of the Templars in 1307 on October 13th, unlucky Black Friday, whatever you want to call it, by Philippe le Bel of France. They used the Templars' names and faces, including their Grand Master Jacques de Molay,
Right.
to hunt them down, torture them,
Take their
take
money.
take their information, take their money, take their wealth. They had the Templars had money. The Templars created usury banking. The Jews did not create usury bank. The Templars
Right.
created usury banking to facilitate Roman Catholic pilgrimage to the Holy Land.
Yes.
They would protect Catholic pilgrims to the Holy Land. The pilgrims were being robbed, brutalized, murdered, and so they would give their wealth to Templars. Templars would give them a script that only they could decipher, and they would go on their pilgrimage. When they returned from their pilgrimage, they would go back to a Templar fort, Templar outpost. They would provide that receipt, that script that only a Templar could decipher, and receive their wealth back with an added percentage of payment. And that was the birth of usury banking, which was perfected in Italy by families like the Medici in Florence.
Get this. Just sorry to interrupt, but I was in San Gimignano, which is in Tuscany, and the city itself is now a UN site, but the old Templar fortress is still there in the city with its kind of specialized Templar insignia, and that was on the road. San Gimignano was on the road of the pilgrims to Jerusalem, so it was part of the step. So you can actually see it's still there from the 13th century. Yeah, it's incredible. So if you ever are in Italy and Tuscany, go to San Gimignano and check out the old Templar site.
Yeah, good for you. And what I've found out as a result, they have learned their lesson. Rome has learned their lesson that by the tracking down of the Templars by their identities, they realized that they needed scapegoats, and they chose Jews as their scapegoats. And to my great disappointment, there seems to be no lack of Jews willing to betray their own people as long as they are empowered, as long as they get theirs. They have no problem being targets and scapegoats because they've been empowered by this system. The very people that what the Inquisition did to both Christians and Jews, just despicable, absolutely unbelievable. And like I said, it really is disappointing to see so many Jews willingly involved in this and literally kowtowing to Rome for their power. And that's the essence. I mean, there's a picture of Epstein in a papal audience with Pope St. John Paul II, him and Ghislaine Maxwell, also Jewish. So Epstein, they knew Epstein was disposable from the beginning. He was selected from the beginning because he was a deviant Jew. As a matter of fact, the New York Slimes backs me up in this. In a, July 12th headline, Epstein taught at Dalton. It's
right.
A very posh private school. Epstein taught at Dalton. His behavior was noticed. So in other words, he was selected. He was a nobody. He was a nobody math teacher at a private school. Dalton is a private school.
Right, $50,000 a year or something. Yeah.
Yes, a very expensive private school.
Just to interrupt, but do you know that somebody asked him whether he was having sex with his students and he wouldn't answer?
Yeah, he didn't need to. He was protected from the beginning.
Right, no, but he was probably involved in this stuff all the way back then, and like you said, that's how he got spotted. Oh, so he's got deviant qualities. This is the perfect guy.
Exactly. And it was a Jewish system that lifted him up. Ace Greenberg of Bear Stearns and Leslie Wexner, the billionaire businessman who took over Victoria's Secret, also a pervert, deviant. I just looked this up just now before the show started, and did not realize that Victoria's Secret was founded by a guy named Roy Raymond and sold to Wexner Raymond, get this, sold to Wexner in 1982. Raymond went into children's clothing and then committed suicide 4 years later in 1986.
Yeah, he jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah, good for you. I didn't
Yeah.
even realize
Yeah.
that. Unbelievable, man.
Unbelievable
So,
stuff, yeah.
yeah, this system where it's surrounded by Jews, but they were in the middle. They were the shields in front of these elites and the Vatican at the top of this.
Well, get this. I mean, and there's also a suspicious death of, I think it was Wexner's attorney, Shapiro, in Ohio. Wexner comes out of Ohio. And
Unbelievable.
yeah, so, but it's pretty remarkable. That's really one of the early, I think the one of the first Epstein victims took place in this weird new city that Wexner started. Her name was Maria Farmer. She was one of the first victims, I think 1994 or something. So it went way back.
And Wexner's attorney's name was Shapiro. I'm going to guess that's also a Jewish individual.
Sure, right.
And the same way that the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is Joshua Shapiro, who outed this heinous scandal. I believe it's the Archdiocese of Pittsburgh, where Roman Catholic priests for generations were raping children over and over again. Josh Shapiro, the Jewish Attorney General, who was trained by the Jesuits at Georgetown. It's the same thing over and over again. And what I mean by trained by the Jesuits, listen, I'm Catholic educated. Not everyone who is Catholic or Jesuit educated is an agent of Rome. But what that means, it's in the Jesuit fourth vow, that they catalog you. They meticulously catalog you. And I love to use an example, one of my all-time favorite actors, Denzel Washington. I love Denzel. Absolutely adore him. Supposedly raised Pentecostal, and yet his parents sent him, I think it's also to Fordham. I went to Donald Trump's Fordham.
Wow.
So here's the deal. If you do not have a passionate, solid, huge foundation of your own spiritual meaning, the Catholic Church is yours. You have any connection whatsoever, whether it's your wife, your daughter, your brother, your sister, your mother, your father, devout Roman Catholic, they own you and you don't even realize it. They have such control over you. You spend 4 years under the Jesuits at Fordham, at Georgetown, or at a high school, or in Georgetown Prep, like at least 2 of the Supreme Court justices went to Georgetown Prep, to include the supposed Protestant Neil Gorsuch, who is Episcopalian from the same parish as the Ramsey family, who sacrificed their little girl, JonBenet Ramsey. How about that for pedophile connections?
Wow.
They own you by having that. There's no way you can have that formative experience either in elementary school, grammar school, high school, college, being tutored by nuns and priests. There's no way you can not have that experience and have some strong feelings for them. It's a draw. And meanwhile, particularly the Jesuits, but Catholic clergy in general, especially the Jesuits, they're cataloging you. They know where you're going to plug in, if you're going to plug in, and they know they will come knocking later on and plug you in here or there. That's why that connection, a Catholic education or a Jesuit education, means so much, because it's the venue. Look, the mere question, the unasked question, that we live with it. We don't even realize it. Why is the Catholic Church running infrastructure in our so-called secular country? They own and run hospitals, orphanages, schools. Why is the Catholic Church so intimately involved in our infrastructure? In Ireland, the Catholic Church runs over 90% of schools, so much so
Wow.
that taxes, education taxes, go directly to the Catholic Church.
That's incredible.
Charlie Manson was selected by a secular judge to be sent to Roman Catholic Boys Town, which is the epicenter of the so-called Franklin cover-up, which was renamed by a Roman Catholic seminarian named John DeCamp. John DeCamp was told by the prefect for the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith, which is basically the Inquisition at the time, Joseph Ratzinger, hey, listen, I want you to take care of this for me. I want you to, go in there, because the director there, Monsignor Robert Hupp, he's a very important guy. He's get this, the director at Boys Town, where they were farming out little boys to be sodomized and raped and violated by the rich and shameless. The director of Boys Town, Robert Hupp, was the United States government representative to the United Nations for issues of child safety.
Wow, that's incredible. That just is so sick. And that was just the tip of the iceberg. Things that were going on in Boys Town were going on for
Yeah.
decades. Decades. That was a standard operating procedure. Yeah.
And that was mainly revolved around the Republican side of the House with Reagan and Bush.
Right.
And I'll tell you, it was one of the hardest things for me to shake, William. It was one of the hardest things for me to shake because I grew up on the patriotism of Ronald Reagan. But my desire for truth superseded that. I mean, to this very moment right now, I still wince at having to talk about the truth of Reagan. And Reagan grew up as a Roman Catholic. His dad and his brother Neil, his dad Jack, his brother Neil were Knights of Columbus. He was baptized and raised Roman Catholic, and hardcore, far left, to the point of almost being a communist. If he may have even been a card-carrying communist as an actor in Hollywood. And suddenly he made this switch and became anti-communist, and that is the only thing that the foundation of Ronald Reagan's so-called conservative bona fides, to use the Latin language of Rome, is his anti-communism. And what was anti-communist about? No, nothing. He simply presided over the fall of the Soviet Union. And during Reagan's presidency, there was more gun control, there were more taxes, there were more illegal immigrants. Everything is so-called right wing, he had none of it. He worked with Roman Catholic, Irish Roman Catholic Tip O'Neill, Speaker of the House. Oh my goodness, the number of speakers of the House who have connections to Rome, especially recently, been just full on in your face about it.
Right.
Recently.
Well, didn't Pelosi just say that she was
consecutive now? Roman Catholic speakers of the House, Democrat, Republican, doesn't matter.
Didn't Pelosi just
Boehner,
state her?
Jesuit trained,
Can
Nancy
you hear
Pelosi,
me?
Jesuit mentored.
No, it's not.
What's his name?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Wife Callista is Trump's ambassador to the Vatican. And you stop right there. Ambassador to the Vatican. What the Vatican is a sovereign city-state, has its own ambassador, and wasn't until the Reagan administration that we renewed relations with the Vatican. Why had we cut off? I don't mean to say we. I mean the United States government. Why was the United States government? I say that because the United States government does not represent us. Why had the United States government broken off connection to the Vatican and recalled the ambassador? It's because there was such overt ties. It was so obvious that the Vatican was behind the murder of Abraham Lincoln that the American people were outraged and demanded action. The government, people in government, tried to cover it up with a military tribunal. Abraham Lincoln there wasn't a lone gunman, John Wilkes Booth. First of all, John Wilkes Booth was a closet Roman Catholic. His sister was Roman Catholic. He was Roman Catholic and a Freemason, a member of Albert Pike's Knights of the Golden Circle.
Wow, yeah.
Is it Pierre Jean or Jean-Pierre? I can't get his name. Jean-Pierre de Smet. I think it's Jean-Pierre. Jean-Pierre de Smet, one of the most powerful Jesuits in the West at the time, was the handler of
Wilkes Booth?
No, Pike. Was Albert Pike's handler.
Interesting.
And it was the Surratt family that was actually the nexus. The hyper devout Mary Surratt, she ran a boarding house, and would not allow anyone in her boarding house to rent a room unless you were Roman Catholic. Hyper devout, and her son John was training to be a priest himself. After the murder of Lincoln, Wilkes Booth supposedly escaped to a house where they supposedly burned the house down on top of him. I have sources that say that he escaped and that was a subterfuge. John Surratt left the country. The Vatican helped him. Often he was disguised as a priest himself. He went through Rome, at one point being pretending to be part of the Vatican Guard there, the Swiss Guard. By the way, they are the the offshoots of the Templars. The Templars went to ground and underground in Switzerland. That's why Switzerland has had such ageless, untouchable neutrality, because that's where the Templars went underground. They're the Swiss Guard, they're offshoots today. And Surratt was eventually captured in Egypt and extradited back to the United States, where he was given his freedom through a so-called mistrial.
Fascinating.
Devout Roman Catholic. So it goes with spider web from one rabbit hole to another rabbit hole to another rabbit hole.
How do you think Epstein was able to get an audience with the Pope?
Because he's a middleman. His controllers are Roman Catholic. Above him, they picked him from the beginning because he was a Jewish pervert, a Jewish deviant. They rewarded him with these connections. He was basically their provider, an expendable provider, in the same way that Lawrence King at the Franklin Federal Credit Union was an expendable pimp for these pedophiles. They brought Lawrence King in. They convicted him not of trafficking children, but of embezzlement. What was he doing? He had embezzled $40 million of Boys Town funds. Now, That's one thing you don't do. You don't steal from Boys Town. And that's poor Alicia Owen was one of the little girls that were raped by these monsters. She got 25 years for perjury.
Right, like it was the victims who got prosecuted.
Yeah. They destroyed that poor girl as a message to any of the other victims that would try to step forward. Lawrence King got 15 years for embezzlement. So they surrounded Epstein with these people and enabled him, but he was always expendable, always. And here's something that I found out that God bless him, one of my teammates, I call him Hawkeye, and he really is a Hawkeye. He found that 3 days after Epstein was arrested, there was a blackout of Epstein's block where his New York apartment penthouse was. A blackout. And I've got links for everything I'm talking about.
I've heard that, yeah.
And so I'm convinced that if there's this idea that Epstein never died in prison, I don't know. If they blacked out, so why would they black out his block? They blacked out his block to disconnect all of the burglar alarms and the cameras and the surveillance stuff, so that they could go in and pull out whatever they wanted that was incriminating.
Yes, yeah, I think so.
So,
well, there's been rumors that they've gone that Epstein and Ghislaine had a safe at their island that they were keeping stuff, and that disappeared while they were still, when did Epstein get busted? In July, but that disappeared sometime in June. So that's a rumor, but somebody was going off their material even before Epstein got arrested.
Yeah, I think that may be a subterfuge to get really outlandish with the Epstein story, to discredit the Epstein story. Why is it that Epstein resurfaced? Epstein was tried in, was it 2007?
I think, 2007, 2008.
Okay, so what happened in 2007? He had 5 federal counts and a handful of local counts in Florida. And some of them were involved with child trafficking and minors and sex and so forth. Yeah. All 5 federal counts were dropped. All 5 were dropped. How did that happen? Not only were all 5 dropped, but the females who were used as honeypots, they're really despicable. Absolutely despicable. So women are used to trap children and entice them to be suckered into the sex slavery. Because if you have these pig men going around hitting on these kids, the kids are going to run and scream. So what do? They use these despicable women, these vile women.
Ghislaine Maxwell for one. Yeah. You still there? Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Ghislaine Maxwell was one of them, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And yes, she was. Another was, let's see here, Sarah Kellen.
Yeah, now Vickers.
Who is now Sarah Kensington, who is now Sarah Vickers.
Vickers, yes.
Married to NASCAR driver Brian Vickers. Nada Marcinkova has been given a new life. So all of these vile, despicable women who preyed upon the trust and the innocence of these children to sucker them in to being violated into this, brought into this sex slave ring, got these sweetheart deals, no pun intended, by the United States government. They got new lives. They didn't really have to give up anything. They didn't have to give up information, and they were given a free pass. Who was it that was basically committing crimes with these criminals? Well, the federal prosecutor, in the same way, pause, another rabbit hole. Before I tell you who the federal prosecutor was, you know that Rudy Giuliani's background, right? He was the federal prosecutor during the so-called satanic panic,
Right.
when children were being violated across the country. And two epicenters were the Presidio, devoutly Roman Catholic Presidio in California, and West Point, where the children of soldiers were being raped and violated in these satanic rituals. Well, who was the federal prosecutor that made sure there was a cover-up, that it was not pursued, that there weren't any real prosecutions? Rudy Giuliani. He proved himself a worthy gatekeeper back in the 1980s, and as a result, he was gifted with being mayor of New York City during 9/11 because he was a proven gatekeeper. So the gatekeeper in 2007 was a federal prosecutor with I think a Cuban Roman Catholic background named Alexander Acosta. And Alexander Acosta personally saw to Jeffrey Epstein basically getting, was like 13-month house arrest.
Yes.
Ludicrous. He was going out during the week and just checking in on the weekends. And here's this monster who is providing children in a sex slave ring to be raped and violated. They actually did this on his private island. Why did they do it there? So that they could commit such heinous crimes that they wouldn't be affected by the domestic laws of the United States. And so Alexander Acosta, what happened to Alexander Acosta? Well, when Donald Trump was picking out his cabinet, he picked as his prospective Secretary of Labor a guy by the name of Andrew Puzder. Andrew Puzder, devout Roman Catholic and also sexual deviant. Andrew Puzder was CEO of Carl Jr.'s. Go look up some of the heinous commercials of Carl Jr.'s taking this poison of fast food and wrapping it in pornography. I mean, literally to the point where he would have Hugh Hefner and Playboy Playmates doing commercials for Carl's Jr. There's a family commercial you would see during the Super Bowl. You'd see this basically softcore pornography. Andrew Puzder did just pervert, deviant Roman Catholic. He was kicked off of, what was it? It was like Thomas Aquinas University, the board there, because they were so offensive. He couldn't get in as Secretary of Labor. Who was Donald Trump's second choice? Alexander Acosta. Alexander Acosta came in, and the Senate just chewed him and gave him a pat on the behind. Oh, we love you. You're our guy. And it wasn't until this outing of this outrage of how Epstein was given house arrest in 2007, given a free pass, that I think they finally made Acosta step down. Oh, wait, here's another great tie. Okay, so Epstein supposedly, so first of all, we were told that he tried to kill himself, and it didn't work. No, wait a minute. You also told us that he's on suicide watch. What exactly does suicide watch constitute for a federal prison? Does that mean you watch and wait for him to commit suicide? So the second time he tried to commit suicide, he was successful. What exactly were the procedures of the suicide watch that were so easy to be overcome repeatedly? So who is the Attorney General? Guy by the name of William Barr. William Barr ousted the female Secretary of Prisons, and in her place, I forget the names, both of them, in her place, added another female who was Jesuit trained. I didn't have a chance to look this up, but William Barr was raised devout Roman Catholic by his father, who was a Jew, converted to Roman Catholicism, and guess what William Barr's father did? He was the headmaster at Dalton.
Dalton, right. I got another tie. Get this. So Dershowitz is a friend and attorney of Epstein, and just published a book trying to refute allegations made against him. And guess who's on the blurb of his book? None other than Louis Freeh, a.k.a. Parachuted into the Sandusky case of just tons of abuse. And all they did is bust Sandusky. Like, are you
Opus Dei Louis Freeh,
Yep.
devout Roman Catholic, FBI. He was the guy who oversaw. He was the gatekeeper for devout Roman Catholic Opus Dei Robert Philip Hansen,
Hansen, right?
who, as part of prior to the global war on terror, we had the Cold War. These are fabricated outrages of money making and tyranny and slavery that are propagated and find their nexus in Rome. And the problem is that communism destroys creativity, and really the Soviet Union was never a viable threat. And so here you needed to continue to feed the Cold War. And by the way, part of this is the fact that the foundation of communism is the Catholic Church. Catholic Church, through the writings of Thomas Aquinas, perfected communes, literal communes in the 1700s, in their reductionist settlements in South America, and then fed them incognito to another Jesuit-trained Jew, Karl Marx, who went to a Jesuit gymnasium, they call it, there in Trier, in Germany.
Germany, right?
And he put it all together for them. But he was the Jewish face of communism. But it had its onus there, its genesis in Russia, because Russia, and during this, I meant to finish this earlier, the suppression of the Jesuits, I'm convinced, conducted their own suppression in 1773 until 1814. And that's the whole purpose of the Illuminati. The Illuminati was just a stopgap to provide them control through Freemasonry. They were sort of a secret group within secret groups. The Illuminati was a secret society within the Freemasons to give them temporary control. After the Jesuits were reconstituted in 1814, there's no need for the Illuminati. Doesn't even exist today. The Illuminati is no such thing as Illuminati today, and anybody that uses Illuminati as a buzzword is just either capitalizing off of the buzzword without having any substance to it, or is willingly putting up a smokescreen. So,
Can I ask you a quick question? Is the Opus Dei, do they have a garter? Did they wear a garter around their leg, like something that?
Yeah, it's called mortification of the flesh.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that they do. It's I call it the Opus Dei syndrome, where this is the difference. This is the theological difference between Catholics and Christians. The theological difference, pardon me, is that Catholics believe they can earn their salvation, and Christians teach and believe that you're forever flawed. The only way you can be saved is by the grace of Almighty God through the blood of Jesus Christ. But Catholics believe that you can do things to counter your sins, and one of the things you can do is mortification of the flesh, where you beat yourself. As a part of their propaganda, they put out this Da Vinci Code, Dan Brown. But it's great in that Paul Bettany in the movie is the psychotic monk, and he shows this mortification of the flesh, where he's beating himself in the movie, and he's wrenching on this similar thing, this garter with spikes on it, a steel garter with spikes on it, wrenching it into his thigh in the movie. And so this belief it's very, very deceptive, very dangerous, William. It's very dangerous, in that it makes you believe, for instance, that if you mortify the flesh for 6 days a week, you can let it all hang out on the seventh day of the week. So you can do any despicable, heinous crime that you want and then atone for it with this mortification of the flesh. You can rape kids, murder kids, and then spend the rest of the week with barbed wire wrapped around your groin. And then suddenly it's, you work your way out of it. And so I'm convinced that this is part of the formula that was the undoing of Antonin Scalia, another devout Roman Catholic. And interestingly enough, a member of the Knights of Hubertus. The Knights of Hubertus is a secret Roman Catholic organization that runs the Bohemian Club and Bohemian Grove.
Interesting.
Why it is that no one knows this? How you have Alex Jones, the guy who calls himself Alex Jones, I don't think that's his real name. His breakout was a so-called crashing of Bohemian Grove, and yet there's nothing in that video of the statue of St. John of Nepomuk with his finger on his lips.
Right, good point.
That says, shush, quiet. No one speaks to St. John Nepomuk, supposedly martyred because he would not give up the confessional to those political enemies. And how it is that anybody should say Bohemian Grove and never mention the Knights of Hubertus, of which Antonin Scalia and John Poindexter were members of. They don't just own Bohemian Grove and the Bohemian Club in San Francisco. San Francisco is a devoutly Roman Catholic city, a very perverse and deviant city, by the way. The control of which is the public-sounding University of San Francisco, owned by the Jesuits. And Stephen J. Privet, the former president of San Francisco University, University of San Francisco, is the mentor of Nancy Pelosi, who is far left, pro-abortion, pro-homosexual marriage, and yet in good standing with the church, as is Joe Biden, so many leftist Catholics. But the Knights of Hubertus own ranches all over, secret, secluded ranches. And it's been rumored from people like, like Kathy O'Brien and other supposed child sex slave victims that they have these perverted hunts of children. And Kathy O'Brien in specific said that she was haunted by Dick Cheney, another guy with a perverted and Catholic background. I did not coming to mind the details. I know Lynn Cheney, his daughter, is homosexual, and to me that's just a red flag, because very often homosexuality is a result of trauma as a child, violation trauma is received as a child. And so this feeds into this Hunger Games thing. We talked about this, I think, before the show.
Right.
And that Susan Collins, who lives in Newtown, Connecticut, the home of Sandy Hook, supposedly is the author of Hunger Games. And there's been a question as to whether or not she was really the author or she's just a figurehead. That they really do this stuff. They really hunt children.
Tons of information. There's tons of information in your books as well. So I would suggest people read them. Definitely Eaters of Children and Illuminati Unmasked. I saw that you got a new cover for that, which looks great. So I definitely highly recommend your books. And again, it's Johnny Cirucci, spelled Cirucci. Thank you so much for the show.
William, thank you. It's been my absolute pleasure. I'm so glad that we maintained contact with each other, and I hope to continue to do so in the future.
Awesome. Likewise, man. All right. So